Today we'll be talking about the Renaissance. Remember, the Renaissance happened during the 14th through the 17th centuries in Europe. Last week, when we did our visual reflection, we talked about what factors led to the decline of the Middle Ages and the rise of the Renaissance. So if you think back to that conversation, we talked about the Crusades, the Black Death, the 100 Years' War. So all of those things, and as well as the church schism, when we had 3 popes, all led to the decline of the Middle Ages and led to the rise of the Renaissance. People that survived the Black Death and all those other factors were happy to be alive. They were looking for some joy in their life, and so that's why we see commoners being able to afford art because they're no longer peasants and they can have jobs. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. So why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? Well, if we look at a map, Italy, the Italian peninsula goes right into the middle of the Mediterranean. So as we've talked before about trade in the Mediterranean, Italy is a prime spot for trade. Due to that, all the trade that came through Italy increased the amount of money in Italy, and then we see a rise of city-states and wealth. Our essential question of the day is, how did the Renaissance change art in Western Europe? The Renaissance means rebirth, and it started around the 1400s in Europe. So the 200 years before that, we saw the rise of the feudal system, invasions from foreign invaders, and the deadliest disease in recent history. So survivors began to question the church, who was not able to keep them safe during the worst times, and began to celebrate life. The revival of trade ended Middle Ages and led to the Renaissance. Increased trade gave rise to Italian city-states and a wealthy middle class of bankers and merchants. Wealthy bankers and merchants wanted to show off their new status by commissioning art. So if you're commissioning art, you're paying an artist to create an art piece for you, or you're purchasing a pre-made piece from an artist. The rise of cities brought artists together, which led to new techniques and styles of art. The Renaissance began in Florence. Florence is right here, somewhat in the middle of Italy. And you can see there's lots of different city-states throughout Italy during this time period. Florence was a vibrant city, a very beautiful city. Lots of different types of architecture and lots of art throughout Florence. Florence was also home to the Medici family, one of the wealthiest and most powerful bankers. The Medici used wealth to commission art and beautify Florence. Now, the Medicis, even though they weren't technically governors or anything like that, they actually ruled Florence for about 100 years as a dictatorship, but they actually never really held office. They were just rather rich royalty. Florence under Medici. So again, they ruled as a dictatorship. They didn't have any actual authority, as they weren't elected in. The Pope didn't give them authority to rule. They just ruled through their power over the city and the money that they brought into the city. They had a large palace, lots of rooms. They had art from the floor to the ceiling. This picture on the left is the Medici Palace. As you can see, it's several different floors. They've got classical styles of art, statues out of marble. And then in the picture on the right, you can see that they literally have art from the floor all the way to the ceiling. They are going to be huge patrons of art, and they commissioned quite a few artists to create their palace in an artistic way. Lorenzo de' Medici commissioned this painting from Botticelli of the Medici brothers as the Three Magi. So here's the three Medici brothers, Cosimo, Lorenzo, and Giuliano. And so this painting was made by, or created by, Botticelli. The Medici paid to build a massive domed cathedral for Florence. Filippo Brunelleschi is going to be the architect that created that cathedral. And he did that by studying the Roman Pantheon when he built the Cupola of Maria del Fiore Cathedral in Florence. I have a quick video to show you the process.
I know you're worried I'm going to go out there and kill somebody, but think about all the people Imagine this. It's 1418 in Florence, Italy. You've been challenged to build a great dome for the Santa Maria del Fiore, one of the grandest cathedrals ever built. And you have no formal architectural training. No pressure, right? For Filippo Brunelleschi, a goldsmith and clockmaker, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. He considered the challenge carefully. Then proposed a daring plan, using methods that experts don't fully understand even to this day. At the time, domes were often built as semicircles. But the town fathers required that Brunelleschi build an 8-sided dome that would be even taller and stronger. It would also have no central support system to hold it up during construction. Even worse, the dome's base was an imprecise octagon with no true center. But Brunelleschi had that covered. There would be 2 domes instead of 1, an inner and an outer shell, held together by giant brick arches and interlocking rings of stone and wood. The rings would work like hoops on a barrel, keeping the dome from expanding outward. To move heavy loads hundreds of feet up, Brunelleschi designed ingenious new machines, including an ox-driven hoist and massive lifting devices far ahead of their time. So, revolutionary design? Check. Groundbreaking engineering? Check. Can-do attitude? Check. But with no central support system, how would he actually build it? First off, the masonry would have to support itself during construction. To do this, Brunelleschi placed the bricks in a herringbone pattern, which spiraled to the top of the dome, with vertical bricks acting as bookends to hold the others in place. They laid about 1 row a week, giving the mortar time to cure. At this rate, the dome grew at a snail's pace of about a foot a month. But perhaps most puzzling is how he was able to place the bricks with such precision. Hey. Many experts agree that he used guide ropes. One theory states that ropes ran from a flower pattern on the work platform that showed exactly where the bricks should go. Another has ropes running from the dome's center, tracing a series of cones that grew smaller as they ascended to the top. Still another suggests a different arrangement of central ropes and wooden templates. However it was done, it worked. The 8 faces of the dome met at the top precisely, just as Brunelleschi had planned. In all, it took 16 years to complete the dome. When he died in 1446, Brunelleschi left behind no sketches and no details as to exactly how he achieved his masterpiece. Today, it remains the largest masonry dome in the world, more than 500 years after it was built.
All right, during this time period, there's an idea of the Renaissance man. So the ideal member of Renaissance was a man who had mastered every aspect of culture, art, science, and philosophy. This person became known as a Renaissance man. Baldassare Castellani describes such a person in his book, The Courtier, A young man should be charming, witty, and well educated in the classics. He should dance, sing, play music, and write poetry. He should be a skilled writer, wrestler, and swordsman. So really, a true Renaissance man is quite talented. He's talented physically, educationally, and artistically. Let's look at some of the new styles of art that came out of the new techniques during the Renaissance. So some new styles and techniques of the Renaissance art. Realism and emotion. So this is the first nude paintings and sculptures since the Romans. Okay, so the people look real, you can see emotion on their face. And again, this will be the first time we see nude paintings and sculptures since the Romans. Remember, all medieval art is very flat. The people are heavily clothed. And so this is going to be quite different. We're going to see classicism. So inspiration from Greek and Rome. So if you look at the statue on the left from the Greeks, you can see it is quite accurate in the body. But it's not as detailed as the statue from the Renaissance. We're going to see an emphasis on individuals and interaction between people. So if you look at this painting, you can see that there's action in the painting. These girls seem to be dancing. This gentleman is picking something from the tree. So you can see action, you can see emotion. And then you can also see there's focus on certain individuals. We're going to see geometric arrangements. Okay, so paintings that have a geometric arrangement. You might have heard of the rule of three. So having three items together, lots of people when they decorate their home, they do use the rule of three, that you have three things together per arrangement. Also perspective, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. So you can see that the people further back, or you can tell that there are people further back than this crowd of people right here. So many artists use perspective. Using light and shadows. So an element of art, chiaroscuro, which is Italian for light, dark, is defined as a bold contrast between light and dark. And then sfumato is a term used by Leonardo da Vinci, which refers to a painting technique which overlays translucent layers of color to create perceptions of depth and volume and form. In particular, it refers to the blending of colors or tones so subtly that there is no perceptual transition. All right, let's talk about humanism. So humanism focused on human potential and achievements. Okay, it didn't necessarily try to make sure that it aligned with the church teachings. And so art and scholarly work shifted from religion to the investigation of humanity and their potential, a movement known as humanism. So in Renaissance Europe, people believed that you could enjoy life without offending God, enjoying fine foods and material luxuries. So even though that most Italians remained Catholic, they shifted towards the here and now. So they focused on the potential of humans, what they could do, what kind of achievements they could undertake. So again, it didn't always align with the church teachings. I'm sorry. And they studied texts to understand ancient values. So out of humanism, we get humanities. So subjects like history, literature, and philosophy. All right, let's take a moment. Let's look at Renaissance artists. The first one we're going to look at is Donatello. So Donatello was the first great sculptor of the Renaissance. He revived the classical Greco-Roman style of sculpture that were realistic and viewed from all sides. Donatello's David is the first freestanding human sculpture of the Renaissance. I have a video for each of the 4 artists we're going to talk about, but I'm just going to post them on my teacher page just so that YouTube doesn't block me when I post this video. Okay, so Donatello, the first great sculptor of the Renaissance. Let's talk about Michelangelo. He was one of the most famous Renaissance artists. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, and poet. His sculptures and paintings showed realism, detail of the human body, and expression to show personality and emotion. So he used a realistic style when depicting the human body. He also made sculpture more realistic by carving natural postures and expression that revealed personality. He revived a classical form in his statue of David, a boy who, according to the Bible, became a great king. So over here on the right is his statue of David. This is his statue, Pieta, and you can see there's quite a bit of motion in this statue. Now, one of Michelangelo's greatest works is going to be the Sistine Chapel, which shows biblical images of amazing detail, power, and beauty. You can see all these biblical images that he has painted at the top of the Sistine Chapel. All right, the next artist we're going to talk about is Leonardo da Vinci. So Leonardo da Vinci was a true Renaissance man. He was a painter and sculptor, and he used realism and emotion. He was also an inventor and scientist. He studied the human anatomy and new engineering technology. He was interested in how things worked. He studied how a muscle moves and how veins are arranged in a leaf. He filled his notebooks with observations and sketches. He then incorporated his findings in his art. So among his many masterpieces, Leonardo painted one of the best-known portraits in the world, the Mona Lisa. And here's the Mona Lisa right here. The woman in the portrait seems so real that many writers have tried to explain the thoughts behind her smile. He also produced the Last Supper, which shows Jesus' last meeting with the 12 apostles before the crucifixion. The facial expressions, the detail, and emotion made it a masterpiece. Raphael. He was younger than Michelangelo and Leonardo. He learned from studying their works. He improved perspective and realism, and he became a favorite painter of the Pope because of his amazing detailed paintings showing a combination of famous Greeks and Romans with Renaissance people. One of Raphael's favorite subjects was the Madonna and Child. He often portrayed their expressions as gentle and calm. He was famous for his use of perspective, and one of his most famous paintings is the School of Athens. The School of Athens blends classical figures from Greece and Rome with important people from the Renaissance. Okay, so you can see Aristotle, Plato, Pythagoras, Euclid, and then Michelangelo, Raphael, and then Plato is drawn to look like Da Vinci. So he mixed the classics with the Renaissance. In general, Renaissance society restricted women's roles. However, a few Italian women became notable painters. Anguissola was the first woman artist to gain an international reputation. She is known for her portraits of her sisters and of prominent people such as King Philip II of Spain. Jane Teleski was another accomplished artist. She trained with her painter father and helped with his work. In her own paintings, she painted pictures of strong, heroic women. So both were accomplished women painters, and they were also known for paintings of royalty and strong women. Renaissance literature. Renaissance literature began to be written in the vernacular. So the vernacular would be the common language of the people. Before this, most things were written in Latin. Not everybody could read Latin. Petrarch is going to be a humanist writer. He's also going to be considered the father of humanism. He wrote sonnets about Laura, who died of the plague. So pretty much everything that he wrote about had to do with his love of Laura. Giovanni Boccaccio wrote Decameron, a series of stories told from the perspective of different young people in Florence. And both of these are renowned writers during the Renaissance. Machiavelli. So Niccolo Machiavelli would write The Prince in 1513, explaining how a ruler could gain and keep power. So even though Italy was prosperous at this time period, the city-states of Italy were constantly at war with each other. So Machiavelli, when he wrote The Prince, he wrote it as a way that rulers could try to figure out how to gain and keep power, so somewhat of a guidebook. So Machiavelli is not concerned with what is morally right, but only what is effective. So Machiavelli argued that a ruler could lie, cheat, steal, and murder if it served his ends. So it raises the question, is it better to be loved or feared? What do you think?